Now, Ask Dr. Love with psychotherapist, author, love and relationship expert Jamie Turndorf, Ph.D. For expert advice on love and relationships, call into the show at 888-463-6748. That's 888-GO-FOR-IT. Or you can submit your question online at AskDrLove.com. Now, here's Dr. Love.
Welcome to Ask Dr. Love Radio. I'm Dr. Jamie Turndorf, and it's my pleasure to be with you again today. Have you ever wished to be in a relationship where you could be emotionally naked in front of your partner, revealing all your warts and flaws and fears and failings, and still feel love down to the bone? From the time we're small, we learn to pack away pieces of ourselves in order to shield us from anger, mocking, disapproval, and all those other negative feelings that we get coming at us from parents, siblings, peers. Before long, you've constructed a watered-down version of yourself. And then what happens? Well, you grow up and you look for love, and you find that you either can't attract a partner at all, or the relationships you form feel incomplete and lacking in vitality and genuine intimacy. And how can you expect to experience a truly intimate love relationship when you aren't bringing your true self to the table? Now, in truth, most of us resist revealing who we are because deep inside we don't feel very lovable. And we figure that if we can't love and accept ourselves, warts and all, how could somebody else? And paradoxically, it's only by allowing your true, authentic self to shine through that you can attract someone who loves and connects to the real you. And allowing the real you to shine through is the only way to enjoy the divine gift of love that lasts a lifetime and beyond. So stick with me, and I'm going to show you how to get to that place. And I'm going to answer just a couple of questions today. The first one is confused by silly boy. And here I'm assisting a 30-year-old woman who recently re-entered the dating scene after a bad breakup 5 years ago. And the man she's got her eye on is always out of town and calling or texting her from other people's phones. And she wants to know how to tell if he's on the up and up or what. So stick around to find out how we can smoke this guy out. And the second question I'm going to answer is, he doesn't want to give me head anymore. And I'm helping a woman decipher why her boyfriend, who used to go down on her for 40 minutes straight, has suddenly stopped wanting to go south. And the more she asks for oral sex, the more he resists. So stick around to find out how she can break this pussy power struggle. And then in the second half of the show, I'm going to be introducing you to Ken Page, LCSW. He's a psychotherapist and the author of Psychology Today's popular blog, Finding Love. And that's had over 1 million reads, his blog. And he's also the author of the upcoming book, Deeper Dating. Deeper Dating has brought insight and intimacy into the lives of thousands of single men and women of all ages. And his psycho-spiritual approach to intimacy is called gift theory. And it's received acclaim from prominent psychotherapists and personal growth experts. And it's resonated for huge numbers of single people. That's why his posts have received over 1 million reads. And Ken's insights and events have been featured in the Oprah magazine, the New York Times, Discovery Channel, Life magazine, Cosmo magazine, Essence.com, The Advocate, and many more media venues. His website's deeperdating.com and KenPageLCSW.com. So now let's get on to today's show. We all want to be loved for who we are. But how can we expect to find true love when we aren't truly being ourselves? All humans are born without any emotional armor. We know what we feel and we don't hold back. When we're sad, we cry. When we're angry, we shout. So how do we end up losing contact with our feelings? What causes us to say goodbye to our authentic selves? Let me give you an example of how this happens. I'll never forget the day I was shopping with my father and his wife. And my adorable little half-brother, Ben, who was only 2 at the time, wanted a toy that he saw in a store window. And when his mother said no, he started to cry. She flew into a rage and told him that she'd give all of his toys away if he didn't stop crying right then and there. My heart just bled for him because he was just crying to express his disappointment. And if only she had validated his feelings and told him that she understood he was frustrated, that we all feel disappointed when we can't have what we want, and that in life we can't have what we want very often. And had she spoken to him in this way, he would have still learned limits, but his feelings wouldn't have been crushed in the process. You can be sure that from that day forward, he would be smart enough to bury his feelings of sadness and disappointment, or any of his feelings. And soon this emotional suppression just happens automatically. We didn't even know what we're feeling anymore. And this is how we become total strangers to ourselves. I have a patient who recalls the first time she cried in front of her mother, and her mother belted her and said, "Stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about." Many of us have heard that. And she too learned right then and there to hide her tears. In fact, she spent a good part of her childhood hiding in the closet, not just hiding herself, but hiding in the closet. When I finally met her decades later as a grown woman, she had already tried to kill herself several times. I had her join one of my groups. She was so shut down and afraid to reveal her true self that she couldn't speak a word for an entire year. And she did eventually speak, and as she risked self-exposure, she reaped the rewards of feeling embraced and understood and validated by her group family. And in time, our love of her became her own self-love. And then she went on to find a wonderful husband who loves her, warts and all. So, another dear patient of mine, she stuttered when she first came to me. She couldn't form a complete sentence when we first met. And I found out that she'd been slapped in the mouth every time she talked as a kid. You know, the old French saying, petit à petit, l'oiseau fait son nid. That means little by little, the bird makes its nest. And in time and with lots of support and encouragement, she reclaimed her true self and voice, and now she talks up a storm. So as these stories that I just told you show, in order to survive in our families and in the world, we learn to form what's called the ideal self. And this is the self that you think you should be, the self that others expect you to be. And in no time, you're in a prison of your own making. And no joke, this emotional prison, its walls and bars, may actually give you a false sense of security and safety. But what happens when you take your imprisoned self out on dates? You know what Chris Rock said about dating? When you meet someone, you're not meeting that person, you're meeting his representative, right? So when you present your ideal self to others, you know on some level that you aren't being honest. And this leads to what I call the imposter syndrome, in which you feel like a fraud and you fear being found out. And since you never do reveal the real you, you have no way of knowing that the real you is where all your deepest treasures lie. So instead, you're thoroughly convinced that if someone were to discover the real you, that person would hit the bricks. So now you're really trapped, kind of like a gerbil on a wheel. You feel compelled to keep up the act or lose your relationship based on your false self. And this isn't any different from the woman who fakes an orgasm. Once she starts this charade, she can't easily back herself out of the corner into which she's painted herself. So what I want you to know is that even though it may feel safer to hide behind the ideal self you create, being inauthentic isn't safe at all. Rather than protecting ourselves, we end up getting hurt in the end. Because when you aren't interacting from your deepest core, the relationships that you form lack vitality and they just don't take off. Because how can another person develop a passionate love for you when you aren't fully present? Or if the person forms a bond with your ideal self instead of the real you, then when your true self comes through, how long can you keep up a performance like that? The person who wanted your inauthentic self won't be enamored of the real you. And above all, being inauthentic doesn't give you what you need as a human being, because we all crave to be truly seen and loved for who we are. And hiding and pretending leaves our souls starved and bankrupt. I'll never forget what my mother told me after my husband died. She said, if you want to find a second husband, you're going to have to hide who you really are, because your strength is going to scare men away. So when should I reveal my true self? After the wedding? Or when the guy's on his deathbed? Come on. This reminds me of the 80s when I was on staff at a posh private inpatient mental hospital. One day I was conducting a group therapy session, and I was talking about the fact that everyone in the room was suffering the ill effects of burying their true feelings, especially their anger. And I invited everyone to come up with a murderous fantasy. And we went around the room, and one fantasy was more anemic than the next, until they got to me. And I came out with the most horrific, gory fantasy of all. And everyone's mouth dropped open. And I said, see, I'm not in the mental hospital, but I give myself permission to feel my feelings and own them, to be authentic and true to myself. That's why I'm not in the hospital. Just as an aside, I'm thinking guys have the additional burden of being straitjacketed by the male gender role that constricts their range of emotional expression. And it so happens that when a woman allows herself to be emotionally vulnerable and communicate from this place, she actually helps a man unlock his imprisoned heart. Now, in the spirit of being authentic, I want to tell you an amazing encounter I recently had with a stranger. And my story is going to just show you the contagious and the healing power of authenticity. And it was my willingness to fully enter the naked now that allowed a stranger to open his heart to me. And this moment of incredible emotional authenticity was a gift for him and for me. Wait till you hear this. Since my husband died, one of the hardest things I've had to do is vacation alone. And this past summer, I went alone to Martha's Vineyard. And after having had dinner alone in a restaurant, I was feeling really sad and lonely. And all of a sudden, I felt pulled as if I was being pulled by a magnet to the Edgartown Wharf. And it was a full moon. An orange melon ball moon was floating in this perfectly clear midnight blue sky. And even though I would never walk down a deserted alley alone, I just kept on going, honoring this pull. And then I sat behind a restaurant on a bench. And in a moment, I noticed that a man was sitting on another bench next to me. He was turned away from me, and he was talking on his cell phone. And I was watching the twinkling lights of the Chappie Ferry. And all the while watching, I couldn't help but listen to him. And I couldn't tell who he was talking to, but he was laughing nervously. And I figured it was a woman he didn't know well. And at one point, I heard him say that the full moon would be so much better if he had someone to share it with. And when he finished the call, he stood up to leave. And again, I felt this powerful force demanding that I speak to this man, which isn't something I would normally do. So I stood and I walked over to him. And suddenly the words, "Don't worry, it will get better," fell from my lips. And the man spun around and he faced me, looking astonished. And as I looked into his face, I was overcome with the sense that I was gazing into a clear pool of water. I saw him. I instantly knew this man, and I knew what he was feeling. And I felt this stab in my heart, and I actually put my hand over my heart because I could feel he was heartbroken. And the next thing that happened was this poor soul proceeded to bare his soul to me. He told me the tale of having been with his childhood sweetheart for the past 30 years, just like I had been with my husband. And he thought the marriage was fine until one day out of nowhere, she moved out without telling him. And that was 2 years ago. And then the most astonishing thing happened. He began to weep like an innocent boy over the pain of losing his family. And I was so enchanted by this awesome gift I'd been given to hold his naked heart. And he told me the history of his marriage and what went wrong and his role in the problems. And suddenly he said, "I go out to dinner with lots of women, but I don't feel comfortable with them. My friends say it's because I've been with one woman for 30 years. And then he blinked and he said, "But I feel comfortable with you." Without missing a beat, I asked him if he'd like to spend time with me when he goes back home. He said, yes. So without thinking, without fearing, will I be rejected, whatnot, not worrying about the future, I just gave him my card and figured it was time to leave. But it was clear that his soul was so starved for an intimate connection that he couldn't stop talking to me. Hours passed, and we were in a world that existed out of time. He wept over his daughter, and he was worried the divorce was going to cause her irreparable harm. He was tormented over not being able to be with her every day. And at first I told him the line that shrinks use, "It's worse for kids to be raised in families where the parents don't get along." Well, that didn't reach him. So I just unzipped my heart and let the words flow. I told him it doesn't matter that he can't see her every day and live with her in the same house. Many fathers live in the same house but aren't loving fathers. There's an invisible string that links us to those we love, and the string stretches beyond the boundaries of a house's four walls. His daughter feels his love. And then I allowed my own pain to surface, and I told him with tears in my eyes that I would have loved to have had a father like him. He held his heart, and he told me that my words brought him such comfort, and he cried, but this time in relief. And then he asked me about myself, and I told him my story and how my husband died of a bee sting, and I told him that relationships don't end in death and there's a string that connects us too. And I also didn't worry about what he'd think, so I just admitted that I felt spiritually guided to walk to this pier and speak with him, and I said I'm glad I listened, and he said he was glad too. It was a true blessing from God. And now we began to walk toward the street, but the conversation continued, and I rested my hand on the handlebar of his bicycle. And we spoke now about his fear of marrying again. How could he trust himself to choose properly when he thought his first marriage was right and that they'd grow old together? And I told him that he and his wife were clearly not intimate and authentic with each other. Clearly they had led separate emotional lives if he didn't even see her moving out coming. And I said, you will never make the same mistake twice. You will talk about your feelings, and obviously you're capable of great emotional openness. Look how you're talking to me. He said, I'm hurting now, implying that normally he wouldn't be this real. And I assured him that so long as he openly shares his feelings, and his partner does too, he'll be fine. He said that the woman he was speaking with on the phone didn't even notice the moon. She wouldn't go outside to look when he spoke of how beautiful the moon was tonight. And to that I said, did you notice that the moon cast a golden carpet over the water? He looked at me with an enchanted, almost smitten expression, and then he asked me if I would be willing to love again. And he wondered if I could after having known such a love connection and given that I still feel my husband's presence. And I said, can't you love more than one child? Our hearts are made to love. As we neared the street, he thanked me for my kindness and for taking such an interest in him, a man I don't even know. And I said, I do know you, not caring how odd this might sound. And he said that I gave him such a gift. And I said, our talk was a gift for me, and I meant it. I admitted that I've been very lonely and missing emotional intimacy. And then I said without fear, I've been looking for a man just like you, a man who is able to open his heart and be intimate. We parted on that note. And despite the pain, that was one of the most beautiful encounters of my life. But to create that kind of intimacy, you have to be willing to expose yourself. And when you bring this gift of yourself to others, others can love you back. And you might have noticed by now that I'm all about being real. I go out on a limb, even showing my irreverent, zany self, even on the air. And people love me, or they hate me. But what's the worst that can happen if you do the same? When you expose your true self, yes, you could get hurt. But nobody dies from emotional pain. Otherwise, we'd all be dead. So here's one last point. People think of love as a feeling, but I say love is an action. First, it's the action of having the courage to leap off the ledge of love and risk exposing yourself. But for love to thrive, you have to be willing to continue making yourself naked in front of your beloved, honestly sharing your deepest core and actively appreciating the goodness in each other each and every day of your lives. And the truth is, we're all starved for intimacy. We speak superficially, we talk from our ideal selves, we hide behind masks, we tell stories. But meanwhile, we're all hungering in the desert as our souls silently beg to be truly seen, heard, accepted, and loved for who we are. Now, if everyone in the world made a conscious decision to offer to others our listening ears and our loving arms, we would discover that the gift of intimacy that we bestow is returned to us 1,000-fold. For you reap what you sow. And the gift I gave to that man on the harbor was truly mine. As I offered my ear and heart to him, I was wrapped in the rosy glow of intimacy. And intimacy is a two-way street, a mutual experience. If you offer intimacy by listening with interest and allowing another to be real with you, you too will bask in this blessed balm of intimacy. So from now on, why not make every encounter count? Allow and experience love affairs with everyone who crosses your path. Each intimate encounter is then going to become your dress rehearsal for a truly divine relationship with that special someone. There are many walks in life, but there is only one path we are all called to travel. And until we learn this lesson, life will continue to break us down and break us open to help us dissolve the walls that block us from loving ever more fully and perfectly. All right, let me give you a couple of tweets on this topic, and then I'm going to take a break. Love grows in the soil of authenticity and withers in the presence of emotional duplicity. Allow your authentic self to shine through, and you'll attract someone who loves the real you. The walls that we erect in an effort to self-protect merely lock us in a jail without any hope of making bail. Bail yourself from emotional jail. Bring inauthenticity to heal, and you'll find a love that's for real. You're the jailer who can set yourself free, and love of yourself is the master key. Be real, and his or her heart you will steal. And when your heart is unfurled, you will rock his or her world. And when you set your true self in motion, you'll find love as deep as the ocean. When you reveal your authentic self, you'll come off the dating shelf. And when you love yourself, warts and all, true love will magically come to call. Allow your true self to shine through, and you will make a love breakthrough. And last but not least, when you grant yourself the license for authenticity, love will soon follow with surprising simplicity. All right, let me take a little break, and I'll be back with you in a moment to answer a couple of questions that I've chosen. Be right back.
You're listening to Ask Dr. Love with Dr. Jamie Turndorf. To speak to Dr. Turndorf live on the air, call 888-463-6748. AskDrLove.com is the web's premier relationship advice site since 1996. Visit AskDrLove.com to search thousands of free relationship advice articles on any relationship issue you may have. Or you can submit a question to her free advice column. However, if you're listening live, why not call in? Don't be shy. Dr. Turndorf wants to help you, and this is a unique chance to get a personal answer from one of today's most respected experts. So, if you have a question for her, please call in now at 888-463-6748. That's 888-463-6748. Now back to Ask Dr. Love with Jamie Turndorf, Ph.D. Once again, here's Dr. Love.
I was just Skyping with my engineer, and he told me I went way too long on my last segment. So I decided I'm going to put myself in a radio timeout. All right. So here's a question that I selected for you. Hi, Dr. Love. I'm sorry to bother you with what might seem a petty problem, but I'm just really confused by this guy's behavior, and it's really messing with my mind. I'm 30 years old and just recently back in the dating game after a bad breakup 5 years ago that shattered my confidence. I met a guy on a night out that was totally keen and told me that he was so glad to meet me, and we completely hit it off. But he lives in another town, so he told me he would come back to visit me in London the following weekend. And then she goes on, I'm going to just shorten this so that I don't overwhelm you with details. She explains that he left the country and he texted her and then his text stopped. And then he said that he was going to call her for Christmas, but then he said he was going to be out of town. And then when he was out of town, he called her and texted her from somebody else's phone. And then she says that she wants to know if this guy's real. Does he have a girlfriend? Is he a player? And I know this may seem petty and I'm a grown woman, but I have not come across this kind of behavior before, and it's really getting to me because I really liked him. Any advice, as brutal as it may be, would be great. Thanks. And she signs this to me, confused by silly boy. Okay, so listen, I think you already know the answer to the question you asked me because you yourself called this dude a silly boy. This guy isn't anything but unreliable. He is in town, he's out of town, his phone isn't with him, he's using a friend's phone, his phone isn't working, he'll text you in the morning, he doesn't text. So I want you to know that you've fallen into a common female trap, which I call love sleuthing. And when in this trap, a woman devotes boundless psychic energy into trying to decipher the mystery behind a man's psyche or his actions. What a waste of your precious energy. Love sleuthing is a form of mental masturbation, minus the pleasure. So why give yourself a mental callus trying to figure him out? Because it hardly matters whether he has a girlfriend, whether he's a player, or an intimacy or commitment phobic. Who cares? Because he's shown himself to be anything but the real deal. He's not behaving like a serious suitor or a mature and serious man. And as you said, he's behaving like a silly boy. So the real question here is, why would you even want to give him the time of day? So I suggest that you focus back on yourself. And the first thing I want you to see is that your self-esteem could use some plumping up. So for one thing, a bad breakup can really erode your self-confidence. And if you felt better about yourself, you wouldn't be giving this man another moment of your time or another speck of your gray matter. So not only is your pursuit of him a symptom of a low self-esteem, continuing to pursue or invest energy in a man who isn't responsive just lowers your self-esteem even further. Now, I know everyone says that modern women have the power to pursue men, and you certainly are free to do this, but when you keep doing all the heavy lifting, you aren't giving yourself the chance to sit back and let the guy just show how serious he is about you or not. And a guy needs to feel that he has to work to win you, because when you do the pursuing, you're sending the message that you don't feel like a prize he needs to win. So first, I want you to read my book, Make Up, Don't Break Up. There's a chapter in the book about how to raise what I call your personal net worth. Because when you feel better about yourself, you will attract better and more worthy men. And you'll never again consider wasting your time with a guy like this. And I also want you to take a look at whether you are unconsciously drawn to a man that you know won't come through for you. You know, maybe you're afraid of becoming involved and getting hurt again. So a guy like this who distances helps you keep a safe distance yourself. Now, there's a good chance also that your past relationship traumatized you and even opened up older wounds from childhood. And as I often explain, we're all driven to recreate the most painful and dysfunctional relationships from our childhood in the hopes of healing our scars. Now, if this sounds like your case, and I encourage you to identify your old scars and heal them using my book, Till Death Do Us Part. Once you're healed, you're going to be ready to form a relationship with someone who will cherish the best parts of you rather than just repeat your old pain. Okay. Now, let me also share with you another question. This one is the wild one, where she's talking about the guy who went down on her for 40 minutes straight and now won't go south at all. So here's the question. Hello, doctor. My boyfriend and I have been together for some time now. Before we made it official and actually settled down, he would always perform oral sex on me constantly for up to 40 minutes straight. He'd even ask if he could give me head. Even after we settled down, he did it regularly. He loved it. Okay. Now it's been almost 4 months since the rejection began, and it started with me asking him to go down on me because I would notice he wouldn't do it on his own. So I began giving him more head to pleasure him, and I think that only made things worse because he'd do it even less. Now it's gotten to the point where he flat out rejects me and comes up with an excuse as to why he doesn't feel like it. He'll say stuff like, my mouth is dry, I'm full from eating, I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, I'm tired. But he's only given me head once in the last maybe 4 months. And I motioned for him to do it. That's the only reason he did it. So, doctor, I don't know what this means. It upsets me because I always pleasure him. And in addition, we sometimes have this problem where his penis goes down while we're having sex. And I become sincere and I try to ask him, what is he thinking about and if anything's wrong, but he insists nothing is wrong. And sometimes he blames it on having masturbated the day before or a few days prior. And today I blew up after he rejected to give me head and he told me I should just stop asking for it, which only got me angrier because he's always asking me to give him head constantly, and I always do. And I even give him head without him asking me to do so. So anyway, after I blew up, I stormed out of the house and went home to prevent myself from saying hurtful things. And I don't know what to think, doctor. Please help me. Okay. So first of all, I was thinking, has this guy stopped giving you oral sex because he's suffering from a case of lockjaw from overuse? No, but seriously. I agree you have a major pussy power struggle on your hands because clearly the more you ask him to go down on you, the more he withholds. Now remember, withholding behavior is a passive way of venting anger. And the person expresses his or her anger by not giving you what you want, in this case, oral sex. So it sounds to me like your guy is really filled with anger. And it also seems like he's unconsciously running a number on you. First, he seduced you with Olympic rounds of oral sex. Then he put your pussy out to pasture. Meanwhile, he expects you to give him oral sex. And at the same time, his penis has started striking. So his explanation is that he's given himself pleasure and has nothing left for you, which is more withholding. So we know he's angry, but he won't own it. And the thing is, the person with a passive-aggressive personality disorder is unaware that he or she is angry because the behaviors actually serve to discharge the buried feelings. And here's the beauty of it. The person never has to get in touch with his true feelings and be authentic and be real. Now, I also have to say that your guy sounds oppositional, too. So I'm thinking he's the kind of person who will do the opposite of what you want simply because you're telling him what you do want him to do. So I bet that he had parents who controlled him, and this means that he stored up a lot of anger toward the parents who told him what to do. And because he hasn't worked out his issues with his parents, he's managed to turn you into his parent so that he can give you the anger that he harbors toward them. And I'm thinking that by giving you great oral sex and then removing it, he set you up to be his controlling, demanding parent. And this way he gets to stick it to you, not the way he didn't get to stick it to his parents. And what's more, he's actually broadcasting to you the fact that he's withholding because you keep asking. So now what do? Well, you can try to get him to look at his behavior and look at how he's provoking you to be angry and get him to be real with you. But to do this, you would ask him, How does he want you to feel when he won't give you oral sex? Does he want you to feel angry? Does he want you to feel deprived? And then you could try to get him to see the link to his own feelings. You could ask him if he felt this way growing up. Could he come up with a memory in which he felt seduced and then dropped, deprived, and angry himself? And just so you know, people will also unconsciously arrange scenarios in which we end up feeling how they did as kids so that we can get a first-hand experience of what they felt when they were young. And if this is what he's doing, then you could say, do you want me to know how it felt for you as a boy? Now, if he's willing to engage in this way, then he'll no longer need to keep the game going. But I'm afraid he's not likely to own his own issues, because to do so, he would have to feel his own pain. And by withholding oral sex, he simultaneously gets to dump his own anger onto you, or I think who he sees as a controlling parent, and he also gets you to carry the fury he felt in response to his parents' controls. So another alternative is for you to do a behavioral maneuver that's designed to get him to directly own his true feelings of anger. And to do this, you would just stop giving him oral sex. And when he asks you why you won't give it to him, you could just mirror back to him what he says to you by saying that your jaw hurts, you're tired. And when you don't give him his way, this may smoke him out and make him openly admit his own true and authentic feelings of anger. And if he comes out with his anger toward you, that would be better than these withholding behaviors. You got your work cut out for you, girl. And I have to say, I don't think you're going to be able to work this through without help. And if you need help, by all means, feel free to consult me in my private consulting division. All right. So I'm going to take a brief break. And when I come back, I'm going to introduce you to my special guest. So I'll be right back in a moment on Ask Dr. Love Radio.
You're listening to Ask Dr. Love with Dr. Jamie Turndorf. To speak to Dr. Turndorf live on the air, call 888-463-6748. That's 888-463-6748. If you like what you're hearing, you can learn about Dr. Turndorf's techniques for turning conflict into connection and healing in her critically acclaimed, groundbreaking book, Till Death Do Us Part, Unless I Kill You First, a step-by-step guide for resolving relationship conflict. Find out more about this book and read a free excerpt by visiting AskDrLove.com. This is Ask Dr. Love with Dr. Jamie Turndorf. And if you have a question for her, please call in now at 888-463-6748. This show is for you, the listeners, so please give her a call now. You're listening to Ask Dr. Love with Jamie Turndorf, Ph.D. Once again, here's Dr. Love.
I'm Dr. Jamie Turndorf, and it's my pleasure to introduce you to Ken Page, LCSW. He's a psychotherapist and the author of Psychology Today's popular blog, Finding Love. And he's also the author of the upcoming book, Deeper Dating. Ken is the founder of deeperdating.com. It's a dating event which has brought insight and intimacy to the lives of thousands of single men and women of all ages, life circumstances, and sexual orientations. And his psycho-spiritual approach to intimacy, called gift theory, has received acclaim from prominent psychotherapists and personal growth experts and has resonated for huge numbers of single people. His Psychology Today posts have received over 1 million reads. And Ken's insights and events have been featured in O, the Oprah magazine, the New York Times, the Discovery Channel, Life magazine, Cosmo magazine, Essence.com, The Advocate, and many more media venues. And his website is deeperdating.com or kenpagelcsw.com. So Ken, welcome. I'm so happy to have you.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for your wonderful work that you do.
You're so generous. Well, I so much appreciate you, and I did a search because I was going to invite Marianne Williamson onto my show, and your name came up, and I read the interview that you conducted with her on Psychology Today, and I was absolutely enamored by the work you do, how well you write, your own authenticity in your work. So tell me how you even developed this particular ministry, because I really call it a ministry. How did this come about?
I think that's really kind, and I appreciate it. And it really has been quite a journey, and I would say that it happened on two levels. One level was my own experience of being single, what I called chronically single, for so long, and having to really see what was it that was blocking me from finding intimacy. And then working, with just many, many clients over decades as well who were struggling with the same things. And what I came to find in my clients is that the qualities that I found were their most beautiful qualities were the ones that they felt most ashamed of and embarrassed by and troubled by. They were the ones that they kind of suppressed. And I found that the same thing was true for me. And those very qualities that are the ones that draw love and that touch us to our own greatness and our magnificence are the ones that frighten us the most, because they're the places we get hurt the most. It's such a strange thing that the places where we've been hurt the most are so often right where our greatness lie. Mm-hmm. And that's the place of our core gifts. And so if readers could if listeners could just take a moment and get an image, just think of an image of a target, and picture that target as you, and every ring going into the center is one level closer to your truest authenticity. And the center of that circle is really your core gift. It's the place of your authentic self. And how do you recognize what that is? Well, it's the places where you feel the greatest sensitivity, greatest passion. That kind of the simplest way to know that you're getting close to your core gifts is you really feel a sense of your humanity. It might be sadness, it might be pain, it might be love, it might be generosity. But the closer you get to a living sense of your humanity, that's the place where your core gifts live. And when you learn to not just accept them, and, you mentioned in your writing warts and all, and that's exactly true, because our biggest immaturities swirl around these parts of ourselves, our deepest hurts. They're like a wild horse inside us that it takes a lifetime to learn how to ride. The more we treasure those parts of ourselves, the more we find love. It's such an exciting and kind of adventurous way to look at life, I think. And I have found that, and I'm sure you found that too in your work. That kind of, and maybe in your life as well as your listeners. That places where we get the most touched are also the places we can get the most hurt.
Absolutely. Ken, somebody said to me, she was a psychic medium, and she said, the ministry, your ministry, is all about connecting souls, helping people connect to each other, whether the souls walk the earth or the souls are in spirit and we're on the earth. It doesn't matter. It's all about connecting souls. And this calling of mine came from the deepest core wound, which then I turned into my core gift, because I was born 3 months early and spent the first 3 months of my life in a hospital. So the psychic medium said to me, and it was so accurate, you never wanted other people to suffer the pain you felt of being so alone and so disconnected.
Mm. So that's so poignant, and that's an example of how when we embrace our calling, even though it touches our greatest pain, our life turns around.
That's right. And so what you're talking about, you and I have been literally on the same path our entire lives, because what you call the core gift, I've been calling the old scar. And, I talk about the old scar, the wound that you suffered, that if you access that and you actually work with that and own the feelings, that I have brought that work into how it will help you heal not only your own wound, but it will heal your relationship. And you're bringing wonderful place of how, in terms of your self-actualization, even in the world, in your career, in everything.
Absolutely. Yeah, the way I think about it is that, when we, just like you did, when we embrace our core gifts, what we experience is this living sense of a self. And it's always changing. It's not like a stagnant thing. It's like a spring inside of us. But it's a sense of self. And that sense of self, just like in physics, the more mass an object has, the more gravity it has. The more we have a sense of that living self, the more we draw in the things that really are magic for us, that really are our life meaning and really our love. As we get brave enough to kind of bear the heat of our core, the humanity of our core, our life shines more and more.
I love that image. It's a beautiful metaphor. Vitality of the core. This beautiful molten lava, of love. Really. It's your essence, which is love. And I was thinking too that we so want love. We want authentic connection, but we're so afraid that we won't obtain love. We won't find love if we show who we really are, that we're really angry inside. We're jealous. We're frightened. But all those things, as you say, are the most lovable parts of us.
Yes. Because, just an example, is somebody came into my practice and she said, I've been in a relationship that's been neglectful and unloving, or I've been treated in that way for decades, and I'm a strong, capable woman. What is it? Why is it that I'm allowing this? Like, what is the weakness here that's made me allow this for all these years? Well, what we came to find is that it wasn't a weakness. It was a strength she never knew how to treasure. And that strength was loyalty. And when she began to realize this profound gift of loyalty, she learned to start to treasure it and honor it. And then this is the amazing thing that happens, is when we find the gift at the heart of the wound and we don't just accept it, but we actually learn to cherish it, this amazing thing happens at the same time, which is we learn a way to protect ourselves. And how do we protect ourselves? By losing interest and taste for the people that don't honor that gift. The more we honor it, the less we're going to be attracted to people who dishonor it. And conversely, the less we honor those core gifts, the oddest thing, the more we're going to be sexually and romantically attracted to people that also don't honor them.
That's right.
So it's an amazing thing. It's a really, I remember I was watching this episode of Alvin and the Chipmunks, and
love that show.
I know, I do too. And it was Theodore, and little baby Theodore. He fell in love with the little Chipette, and just completely loved her, and he was just moaning about the fact that she wasn't interested in him. And Dave looked at him and said, well, all right, Theodore, so don't just be yourself. And Theodore yelled out, I tried that already. And, that's what happens to us. We try that, usually we try that when we're younger. We have a first love, and we show everything. But we don't know how to do it with wisdom or discrimination, and we get so hurt that something inside us says, all right, I tried showing myself. That certainly doesn't work. I'm going to come up with a new and more packaged and more marketable me, and that's going to find me love. And then when I've sealed the deal, I'll show who I really am. And, we know, you and I know that that's the road to despair. Because it's only the treasured people that cherish our gifts that's the only place we want to build our home.
Right. Now, I often, in my writing, I talk about the fact that we will choose partners who emotionally resemble the parents who wounded us, so that you're not going to get a better outcome. You're not going to get a happy ending. You're not going to feel treasured for who you are because you've chosen somebody who is going to treat you in the same damaging way that your parents did. And it's such a compulsion for us to try to get blood from a stone and get the leopard to change its spots. That's what you're calling attractions of deprivation, isn't it?
Yes, that's an attraction of deprivation. And, that's something, Jamie, that I say is that in a way, like there's this binary rule. Like it comes down to something so simple and binary, and that is that to the degree possible, you can't necessarily do this with all your relatives, but certainly in the search for a new relationship and anywhere in our lives, it comes down to something very simple, and that is only saying yes to our attractions of inspiration. The people and the situations that inspire us with their consistency, their generosity, and the way that they feed us.
Love it. Let me take a brief break, Ken, and we're going to come back and we're going to talk more about attractions of inspiration. I'll be right back with you and my guest, Ken Page, on Ask Dr. Love Radio.
You're listening to Ask Dr. Love with Dr. Jamie Turndorf. To speak to Dr. Turndorf live on the air, call 888-463-6748. That's 888-463-6748. If you've recently been through a breakup and are looking for a second chance, wondering how you can reconcile with your ex, or if it's even possible after all you've been through, Dr. Turndorf's latest book, Make Up, Don't Break Up, presents her 5-step plan for reconciling with your ex. This plan was developed out of years of research, working with thousands of couples at her Center for Emotional Communication. This is a proven no-hype and no-nonsense method that gets right to the root of the problem to guide you to the right path towards reigniting a lasting relationship. For more about Make Up, Don't Break Up, visit AskDrLove.com. You're listening to Ask Dr. Love with Jamie Turndorf, Ph.D. Once again, here's Dr. Love.
I'm Dr. Jamie Turndorf, and I'm talking with my guest, Ken Page, psychotherapist and author of Psychology Today's popular blog, Finding Love, the author of the upcoming book, Deeper Dating, and the founder of Deeper Dating, a dating event which has brought insight and intimacy to the lives of thousands of single men and women, of all ages, life circumstances, and sexual orientations. And he invented a method of a psychospiritual approach to intimacy that he calls gift theory, and he's been featured all over on all kinds of TV and radio and magazines, and his website is deeperdating.com, KenPageLCSW.com, and we were talking before the break about attractions of inspiration. So Ken, let's talk more about that.
Sure. About specifically attractions of inspiration or deprivation as well?
It's both. To me, what I find, and I'm sure you find also, that there's a compulsion for many people to keep going back to the partner that's an empty well, or to keep choosing partners, keep re-injuring us. And the shift to moving into an attraction of inspiration to people who will feed you, heal you, give you different kinds of loving messages, that is a very difficult shift for people.
It is a difficult shift. It's really true. And here's what I find is the key. As much as, I'm a therapist, I believe in therapy deeply. But what heals in a therapy relationship is the same thing that heals in other places, and that is relationships. And we cannot come to cherish our core gifts on our own by willpower or by just affirmations or any of those things. We need to be around people who treasure those parts of us, and we need to be instructed in the beauty and the worth of our authentic self by the people around us. You can't pull yourself up by your bootstraps for more than, a tenth of a second. The same thing is true with learning to really claim your authentic self. You just can't do it internally. You need those treasured people that see you for who you are and honor your gifts and inspire you to honor theirs.
100% right. Because if you think about how we become human, we don't develop in a vacuum. We develop in a relationship.
That's so true. It's so true. And then it's almost like I feel we have two actual circuitries. Like all of us, to some degree, can be attracted by relationships of deprivation. That is where somebody's like almost available, a situation is almost nourishing, or it's nourishing, kind of alternating with abuse. And all of us can be attracted to those situations for just the reason that you said, that they remind us of kind of the negative parts of the caregiving that we got. But just even for people who are constantly attracted to those things, those same people, every one of us also has a circuitry where we can become attracted to goodness, to generosity, and to consistency. It's a different process. It's a different circuitry, and it's rusty in a lot of us because it's not what we're used to. But the more we fill our lives with those people, the more we create not a vicious cycle, but a healing cycle, where we learn to love ourselves more, and then we're with safe people so we can send out our love more. And the act of sending out love and having it received and treasured is like an instant experience of a kind of washback of self-love that we experience. So we really get to choose those attractions. And, you had mentioned the thing about getting blood from the stone, and if I could just share a story.
I'd love to.
Thank you. A friend of mine was a performance artist, and he had been in a series of relationships with people who were just unavailable. And he finally said in one of his performances, he said, you know what? I have learned how to get blood from a stone. There is an actual way to do that, and I know how, and I'm going to teach you. And he said, you take a stone, and you start hitting yourself on the forehead again and again and again until you're so dazed and bewildered that you don't know where the blood is even coming from. And that's what an attraction of deprivation is like. You get so bewildered and so confused that you start to feel, it's my fault. It's my fault. If I could only do this differently or that differently. And that's an endless loop that most of us have been in, and hopefully most of the listeners now are out of. But if you're not out of it, then I really encourage you to get support to see what you can do to create a shift there.
Mm-hmm. From what I do with my patients that I'm sure you have found is very helpful too, is one of the first things I say is no relationships. You can't be in any relationships, no love relationships, no boyfriends, no girlfriends, till we get some healing out of our relationship together, till you feel differently about yourself, till you have the love of the group. I always put people in groups, and it's a second chance family until you feel loved and embraced and valued by everybody in the group. And then when you're a different person and you're able to cherish what we cherish in you, then you can go take your show on the road.
Yeah, because until then, you won't know how to take your show on the road. It's a very good point.
Yeah. Man, as soon as I felt such a connection to you that as soon as I read the article that you wrote and then followed from there to read your other writing, I felt such a connection to you that I imagined myself saying, want to be friends?
I'm so appreciative of that, and I felt the same way reading your writings, and I guess that's an attraction of inspiration.
Absolutely. And, there's a part of me that is, it's kind of like I never really lost the little girl in me, the vulnerability, even though I'm the doctor and all these things. This authenticity in me is what enables me to just take the risk, because I think probably having lived so much pain, and I was so ill from being born so early, so much pain, I think, what's the worst that's going to happen? So he'll say, no, Jamie, I don't want to be your friend. I won't die,
Yes. And that's kind of it in a nutshell. And I so agree. I so appreciate you saying that. And I so agree, because I just think that's kind of the path to happiness. Like, you pick the people who inspire you and you reach out. That's almost like the simplest path to happiness that exists in this world.
Absolutely. Ken, there's one thing I wanted to say that I always think is important when we're talking about being authentic and being real. Very often people use authenticity as a license to kill others, verbally, emotionally. And this is so distressing. And we've even seen therapists who encourage this, come into the office and and go beat on each other, take turns. You're never supposed to vent raw feelings on another person. You're never supposed to say anything that's destructive. You're only supposed to say what you know is going to be beneficial and inspiring. I'm sure you agree with this. I
deeply agree with it. And you know what line I really love, and it's one that I use as a mantra with my clients and in my own life. It's from Al-Anon, and it's say what you mean what you say, and don't say it mean.
I love it. I love that. I really do. So how are you and I going to continue our attraction of inspiration?
Well, that's a wonderful question. Well, hopefully we can work together. I would love to come back on your show if that's ever possible. And I'd love to continue that connection.
Absolutely. And I don't think you even live that far from me. You're in Manhattan, so I'm going to dog you.
You know how to reach me. Wait, you're in Manhattan too?
No, I live in the Hudson Valley, but that's not so far away.
That is not so far away. Well, that would be wonderful.
Really wonderful. And is your son feeling better? I think you said he was very sick. Is he better?
Oh, thanks for asking. Yes, he is definitely better. He's better. Yeah. There's a lot of colds going around, but he's better. Thanks.
So what would you like me to remind my listeners about you, your book that's coming up? Tell us anything that you would like us to remember so that everyone can find you.
Oh, thank you so much. I do ongoing classes of this work for single people. And you can find out information about that at deeperdating.com. And I also do psychotherapy, and I do that at distance through Skype, or individually and in person as well. And if people are interested in my work and my approach, I encourage all of them to reach out to me. And also, when you go to Psychology Today, when you go to my website, you'll see my Psychology Today posts. And on my website and on those posts, you can join my mailing list. And I am looking for people's stories of people who have found real love in their lives or have just grown in their intimacy journey and learned big lessons. I'm looking for stories that are inspiring around that for my book. So this is an open invitation. If people feel moved to share a story, you could just do that through my website, and I'd much appreciate that.
Well, so I have to say goodbye now to you, Ken Page, but I'm not going to say goodbye. I'll say so long. And remember, you guys, as Charles Schulz, the founder of Peanuts, said, the creator of Peanuts, be yourself, because everybody else is taken. See you next week on Ask Dr. Love Radio.